So,
All right. Good morning, everybody. You've made it to the almost end. It's the last day of the conference. I hope everyone's had a good conference and has learned a lot. And thank you for coming to our presentation today. Some of you might have seen me earlier give a presentation on microgrid and energy. Now we're going to talk about the other side of utilities, which is water, wastewater, and solid waste. And this presentation is about SDS, Sanitary Deficiency System, and how teamwork makes the dream work. And so the team obviously is San Pasqual and the tribe, myself, John Flores, I'm the environmental director and water manager, and IHS, and I'll let my partner in SDS introduce herself.
So, hello, good morning. My name is Julie Makerzak. I'm an IHS project engineer out of the Escondido district office here in Southern California. I'm going to go straight into it. So just a very, very tiny bit of background. I don't know how familiar everyone here is with IHS. The Indian Health Service is an agency under Federal Department of Health and Human Services. And the main task as Indian Health Service as a whole agency is to provide federal health services to American Indians and Alaska Natives. Now, within IHS exists the Division of Sanitation Facilities Construction. There we go. So a subset of IHS as a whole, Indian Health Service. And we have the responsibility of providing technical assistance and funding to tribes to design and construct water, sewer, and solid waste facilities, or water, wastewater, and solid waste facilities, but then also do things like technical assistance for utility master planning, sanitary surveys, and then improving capacity to operate and maintain those sanitation facilities. We also assist tribes during sanitation facility emergencies when needed. But the main thing, that first bullet point, is one of our mandated tasks is to maintain an inventory of existing deficiencies in Indian country for water, wastewater, and solid waste facilities. So the Indian Health Service Sanitation Deficiency System is an inventory of existing deficiencies and the projects that are developed to address those deficiencies in Indian country. It's a report we have to do annually and provide to Congress. We've been doing it since 1989. And then Congress takes that report, sees all our estimated costs to correct all of those deficiencies, and they're rated at different deficiency levels. And then theoretically, they use that total cost estimate to allocate a budget for the sanitation facilities construction program to correct some of the deficiencies. We don't usually get enough to correct every single deficiency, but it's the report they use to determine how much funding is allocated for the upcoming fiscal year. So the sanitation deficiency system is a method to prioritize projects based on health impacts and tribal input. As Congress appropriates money and it gets dispersed to each of the IHS areas, the areas use that money to fund projects from the SDS list in order of priority. There's 3 general categories. You've already heard me say them: potable or drinking water type systems or deficiencies, sewer, septic, and wastewater deficiencies, and then solid waste deficiencies, which also includes corrections for illegal dumping. So the Sanitation Facilities Construction Program within IHS has eligibility requirements for projects to be funded off the list. And one of those is that the SFC program exists to serve homes, tribal homes particularly. So one of the eligibility requirements is that the project has to address the deficiency at homes. Also, every project that potentially could be funded from the SDS list must address an identified deficiency and have a health impact. Those are the 2 basic eligibility requirements. An eligible home for IHS SFC program is a home occupied by a tribal member as their primary residence year-round. It can be a community home, so we can have community projects, or it can be a scattered home where we just do individual corrections for that home. Sometimes we group them into a district-wide project, but it's still individual services for each identified home. Ineligible beneficiaries can still benefit from a project, and those would be non-tribal homes, homes that are under management through a HUD-funded housing program, because HUD funding should cover corrections to deficiencies at those homes, and then any non-residential user or beneficiary to the project, which is offices, including government office, tribal government offices, schools, medical facilities, businesses, and any other user that's non-residential. Those ineligible beneficiaries can still be part of a project, but at the end of the day, the estimated cost estimate, they have to provide a contribution to cover their portion of the total cost estimate. So once a project is in SDS, it's been determined that it's got eligible homes and there's an eligible deficiency that we can address to improve health. We have a scoring system. This is a project that's primarily maintained by engineers, so of course it's all based on scoring. So the 5 primary ones are the deficiency level that's been identified, the impact to resident health, which is called the health impact, the estimated cost per home, the utility operation and maintenance capacity score, and then a tribal priority score. And that's a little screenshot from our online system that we use to score projects. You do see there's a couple other categories in there, but those are generally just for special circumstance projects. So when we're scoring, the severity of the deficiency in the health impact is reflected in the scoring. And I have an example deficiency there and an example health impact. And, you know, regardless of my knowledge level, I have to use a deficiency from a list of deficiency that's been provided to me. If it's not on that list, I can't justify the project as an eligible deficiency. Now, the examples I have of the deficiency, water distribution system pressures that are less than 20 PSI under normal operating conditions. That's a very specific one. They're not all that specific. I picked an easy one for the example. Some of them are more broad. They give me more leeway to, you know, justify the project based on the statement that's provided. But it is a list of statements, and I have to put one of those statements associated with the project for it to be considered eligible. Same thing with the health impact. I also have a list of statements of health impacts that I have to associate with the project. There's even more leeway on the health impact. There are some specific examples like the one up there, wastewater treatment facility with unlined lagoon cells that drains to water source. That's a very specific one. There's some more broad ones that say, you know, generalized health impact, and I just have to be able to say, this is why I'm stating generalized health impact, et cetera. It might seem like the deficiency and the health impact are kind of the same thing, and they do often appear to be very, very similar statements. But you can have low deficiency projects with a high health impact and vice versa. And so by using both of these to score out the projects, it really means that when there is a project that has both a significant deficiency and a high health impact, that it really helps that project rise to the surface and be more likely to be funded. I wanted to mention one other thing about EPA, or excuse me, about SDS. There are other agencies that sometimes come to IHS and say, can we see your list? What do you have? We want to identify projects for funding. Currently, the EPA Clean Water EPA Clean Water Indian Set Aside Program, they just use SDS to identify projects for funding. However, EPA Drinking Water Tribal Set Aside does not use SDS. They have their own application and their own timeline for applying for drinking water funds. They like to see it on SDS, but it's, as far as I know, it's not a requirement. And then the state has sometimes approached us and said, hey, what's your list got? Can we talk about maybe projects? And then we would still go to the tribe and ask, you know, do you want to talk about state funding? But they could use SDS to identify projects. So that's my quick summary of what SDS is and how it works. And I have a couple of recommendations for anyone out there who's like, oh, I want to talk to my IHS project engineer about this project that I never knew might be eligible for SDS. Number one, as soon as you have a deficiency, you think you want to talk about putting on SDS, start documenting it. Take photos, preferably time-stamped photos. Save work orders. If you don't have a work order system, start making one. And then if you do purchase any services or materials to address a problem, Save those invoices, keep them for your IHS project engineer. 10 years ago, we could justify projects with verbal statements from operators saying, we have this problem, this thing overflowed 5 times last year, we had this many water main breaks to repair. That standard has gone significantly higher. We now have to have pictures. Even if you can't get any of these things, at the very least, send your IHS project engineer an email saying, hey, on such and such a date, we had to fix this problem. And then if it happens again 2 months later, send another email so there's at least an email chain showing that the problem has occurred and when it occurred each time. So now the level of justification is much higher. The other recommendation is communicate with your IHS project engineer early and often. So communicate with them as soon as you think you have a deficiency you want on the list. If it's determined that it's got eligible homes and an eligible deficiency, then there's still going to be a bunch of communication that happens for that engineer to justify it, collect the information from you, put it in a format that's acceptable for the system, but then also they have to evaluate alternatives to correcting the problem. And the more communication there is in that process is going to result in a better resolved proposed solution. So the best project that's going to be most likely to get funded is one that has adequate or more than adequate justification and a thoughtful proposed solution that has already been at least preliminarily assessed. So by doing these 2 things, you can be more likely to get your project funded. That's the end of my SDS portion. John's going to talk about success stories.
All right, thank you. All right, I got this a little bit out of order. Somehow my slides got a little turned around. So I'm from San Pasqual. I'm the environmental director, water manager. I also do TIPO, so I wear multiple hats for the tribe. I started with the tribe doing kind of the water management stuff. So I've been working with IHS. I've worked for the tribe for now 12 years. I've been working with IHS basically for the last 10 years doing projects. We've had a pretty successful track record of getting projects funded through SDS, through the EPA Tribal Drinking Water Set Aside, and also through the state of California. How we did that was kind of what Julie said, is I talk to IHS early and often, whether or not there's a deficiency today that I know about or a potential improvement on my water system that I want to do in the future. I start having that conversation right away with Indian Health Service, with EPA, my drinking water officer, Greg Golson, or Jason before Greg, who was in that capacity with me. I document a lot of stuff, like Julie said, by pictures, maps, anything. I meet with my water board, once every other month, minutes with my water board. Also talking about my water board about what they want to do on the reservation in terms of new residential applications coming in for people moving on the reservation. Because, a deficiency might be we don't have enough water capacity in a community that we want to develop on the reservation. So a little bit about San Pasqual. We were established in 1910. We're located in Valley Center, which is just northeast from here, from Viejas. We're a Kumeyaay tribe, so we're part of the Kumeyaay Nation, which is Viejas. We're the northernmost band of the Kumeyaay Nation. We're right near Rincon and the Luiseno tribes up north. The reservation is about 3,400 acres. The original trust land was about 1,500 acres. The tribe has bought about 1,900 acres, and fee that we've brought about another 1,000 of that into trust now. We have 152 enrolled tribal members, 1,600 lineal descendants. The reservation population is about 2,300. We have 450 homes on the reservation, and every home on our reservation is metered either by our water department or we have a connection to a local municipality. So about 325 service connections that we manage. The other 125 or so are managed by Valley Center Municipal Water District. And we'll get into the presentation. So real quick, this is just a map showing San Diego County. Everything in light blue you see are municipal water districts. So like City of San Diego, Valley Center Municipal Water District, and everything in the pink and red are tribal nations. So San Pasqual is a little unique in the sense that we can connect into Valley Center Municipal Water District to get water. So we've done SDS projects where we've dug our own wells on the reservation where we have our own wells, or we've also done stuff where we connect directly into Valley Center Municipal Water District, and we've used SDS funds, EPA funds to help pay for that. So we've worked with our local municipality. This is a tribal reservation right here. Everything in orange is our trust land. Everything in green is our fee land. The majority of our population and connections are located in districts A and B up here. That represents probably about 280 of our connections. Once again, we're 100% metered on the reservation. We also send out water bills to our customers because it's a combination of purchasing water from the Indian Water Authority via Valley Center Municipal Water District. So we will our water rights that we won through a water settlement through Valley Center's service through their water lines. The way I like to explain it, it's kind of like a toll road. Basically, we own the water, they own the infrastructure. To get the water from point A to point B, we have to go through their pipes. So we pay them a toll, basically, to run water, what's called a wheeling, through their system to get to our system that we then disperse to our customers. District A is a combination. We have 2 wells, and then we're connected to Valley Center on the southern end. And then District C up here, the Duro community, is 100% well water. But we are doing a project to connect to Valley Center and bring a water line. Valley Center's water line ends here, and we're going to bring it all the way down Lake Wolford and up the road. So about, I don't know, 2 miles or 2.5 miles of 8-inch water main we're going to plow up to the reservation because the tribe has identified this as a high growth area in the next decade. There's about 12 homes up there when we started our water system with IHS that we got funding through IHS to run 6-inch line up there. And we built a tank up there, and you'll see that in the later slide. So one of our project sites, this is the first ones that we got funded through SDS when I was with the tribe. This was the District B water tank replacement. And we did this back in 2014. And let me go back because the slides are a little out of order. So the District B potable tank project was FY 14-15 funds with SDS. The tribe received $900,000 to build a new 250,000 gallon potable tank for District B residents. It was funded by the 2 programs that Julie mentioned from EPA, which was a tribal border infrastructure program at the time, and the drinking tribal water set aside. So those were the 2 funds we used. You can see almost split evenly to build this. And the deficiency on this was basically, oh, sorry guys. The deficiency on this one was we had an existing, you can see in the one picture here, it was this blue tank. It's a bolted 100,000 gallon tank. It was built in 1998. In 1998, there were about 50 or so residential households that were coming off this tank. Fast forward to 2012, 2013, when we put this in for funding, there were about 130 residents, plus we were servicing all of our government center and a portion of the casino admin buildings. So the deficiency was we definitely did not have enough water to adequately support our community and the growth of our community, because that was at the time. Since then, we're about to up to 150 homes. Also, the bolted tank, anyone that has a bolted tank, the number one enemy to a bolted tank or any tank in general is rust. So this tank was, having a lot of rust, some issues with it, with leaks springing. So we got this funding and we said, let's build a welded tank because you have less rust, less bolts failure in them. So we were fortunate to get funding. We put it in SDS and then it got funded through EPA. They pulled it directly off. It scored really well and we were fortunate to get funded. And also on this project, there was an existing old 20,000 gallon little tank next to it. That was also somewhat of a deficiency because it was still technically connected to the system. There was just a valve closed. So there was a concern of cross connection with the old tank. So part of this project was destroy the old tank and remove it and then build a new tank in its place. The blue tank went offline from a potable tank and we use that as an irrigation tank now. So how do you build a tank? This is a District B tank project. It took us, after we got the funding, and we got into construction. Construction was about 6 to 8 months. Go ahead and hit play. But this is how we built the tank. We compressed 8 months of construction into a 2-minute construction video right here that we did. And a part of this I want to talk about is on some of these projects, we're also trying to build tribal capacity. So on some of these projects, we're using tribal labor through the IHS force accounts. So you didn't see this on this one, but our crew tore down the old 20,000 gallon tank. It was, pretty easy. We just got an excavator up there and literally knocked it down. And then we removed it. And then we did the over compaction on this. And then the company we hired did the concrete and everything else from there. So we got paid from IHS on this. The tribal government did about $25,000 to do some of this work, right? So that was really good. And you'll see this on another project where we use our own water department to do a project that was funded through IHS as well through SDS. So this was a really nice tank. It's in operation, of course. Now it's 250,000 gallons, meets the needs of the community, the current and future needs of the community. We dive it, every 3 years. No rust issues. We've had no issues with this tank. It's a beautiful tank. Highly recommend it if you can get the funding to do a welded tank. Please do so. In terms of, as we know, IHS, EPA, they don't really fund O&M after a project's completed. O&M on a welded tank is very minimal compared to a bolted tank. Over the years, we've had to replace bolts and, leaks in the bolted tank. We had to sandblast it recently because we still use it for for irrigation water. But this tank will last a lot longer than your bolted tank will. It does cost a little bit more. And Julie and I had another project that's in here, and we'll talk about like a bolted tank and something that happened that we wish we had the money earlier. We could have done something, but we made it work. So that's the District B tank replacement project. And so I worked with IHS early on. We identified we wanted a new tank. We put it in. We got the $900,000. The nice thing about this too is the Duro, that District C community. This was a growing community. At the time, we only had 12 to 15 homes up there. And our deficiency was the homes were being fed by 4 little, 2,000 gallon green plastic tanks, right? And they weren't in a very safe, secure location. They weren't really meeting the need of the community. So we put in the SDS funding to build a large 80,000 gallon bolted tank. And so Julie and I got funding for this. And it was a combination of SDS funding that we secured. And I believe Bureau of Reclamation kicked in a little bit of money on this project as well. So like Julie said previously, the nice thing about SDS projects is, you can turn these over to EPA for potential funding and the state. So we had done, a preliminary engineering report on this and what we needed through IHS. I have a pretty good relationship with the state of California, and we participate in the regional water or IRWM, the Integrated Regional Water Management Board of San Diego. IRWM came to me and said, we would like to fund a tribal project, and we just got about $180,000 returned to us from a project that didn't go through. And this is in January. We had just finished this tank and brought it online. They said, but you have to spend the money by June 1st. And I said, I need another tank at Duro Road. Here you go. And I gave it to them, and they said, perfect. How quickly can you begin? So I actually just called the same contractor that built this tank, and I said, I need that exact same tank built right next to it. So for one SDS project, I got 2 tanks out of it. This is an 80,000 gallon tank, right? 80? Yeah. And we built a second 80,000 gallon tank right next to it. Now, like I was saying about bolted versus welded, Julie and I put this out to bid because we really wanted a welded tank. Unfortunately, the cost came back over what we had. If the state had came to me probably 3 months or 4 months beforehand, we would have had the money to build a welded tank, and it probably would have been maybe 100 to 120,000 gallons in capacity. As that said, at least I got 2 tanks out of this, and now we have 160,000 gallons of capacity. One tank is called the Julie tank that I just did, and the other one was done with our tribal engineer, Ray Suarez, and we call that the Ray tank. So there's the Julie tank and the Ray tank. And now we have 180,000 gallons in Duro. There's 25 to 30 homes up there now. with the expectation that in the next 5 years, there's going to be about 100 homes up there. So we have the capacity for our current residents to serve. Also, water pressure was an issue where our old tanks were. They were a little lower on this mountainside. So people were experiencing low pressure because there's some homes that were close to it. And as soon as we put this up there, all those pressure issues went away. The nice thing too, even though SDS, and this isn't taken into consideration, of course, is fire suppression. That's of course very important to a tribe that's in a rural area that has experienced large forest fires and wildfires. So fire was happy because now they had 160,000 gallons of capacity to potentially fight a fire. Before our old tanks, we had 12,000 gallons of capacity. That is nothing to fighting a fire. 12,000 gallons, a fire department will burn through that in like 10 minutes, right? So this gives also the residents and the tribal government some sense of security that we could potentially fight a fire if needed to. It's not in this slide, but then we went to SDS and said, hey, we have this growing community. We only have one well and it only does 10 gallons per minute. That's not going to keep up with our growth. We really need a second well. So we got about $300,000 from SDS to dig a second well, and we're very fortunate. It's right near the tank. It's just at the base of these tanks that we built on the mountainside. And we dug like a 600-foot well, 900. Oh yeah, we went 800. We went 800 feet. We hit really good water, and we just brought that online too. And also in that funding was to not only dig the well, but also to build the pump house. And then we got funding also through SDS for our old well that was on Duro Road to build a new pump house for that one. So the new well does 40 gallons, about 40 gallons per minute. I think we're just gonna run it about 30. And our existing well does 10, so now we're at 40 gallons per minute. And eventually we will connect into Valley Center Municipal Water District as a backup on this one. And this is the picture of the tank going up. So you can see this is a bolted tank. Really beautiful tank, does a great job. Beautiful view at the top of the mountain. So as I said, San Pasqual is 100% water metered. And we had, usually would take my guys 2 full days with 2 of my operators to go out and read every meter on the reservation, because we'd have to pop the meter box lids and actually read them and write them down. And there was always errors because of human errors. They transcribe numbers, flip a 6 and a 9 or reverse them. And then they have to go to finance and they would key them in manually. And there's always errors, and it took a lot of time. So in SDS, on one of our projects, we had a little bit of extra funding because we came in under budget. And then we said, well, we have this money through SDS. Can we do smart meter replacements? And we worked with Indian Health Service and EPA, and they said, yeah, go for it. Because, one thing about meters, which is nice, is it lets you know if there's a leak going on in either the service line or the house itself. And why might that be important and a deficiency? Because if you went to the cross connection control stuff, that can potentially be water getting into a system that can then cause, illness or sickness. And then, it's a cross connection issue if you have a leak going on in your house. It was a financial issue for our residents, because if you're only reading the meters once a month and there is a leak going on, they don't know about it, they're going to get hit with a very large water bill. So these meters that we put in and installed, they're 100% smart meters. What they do is, you can see that little black thing on the lid there. That's the cellular data point with a lithium battery in there. They're good for about 10 years. Once a day, usually around midnight or 2 a.m., they'll activate themselves and they'll download their usage via cell towers. When we first put these in, at the time it was using 2G technology, because that was like the low government frequency bandwidth that you could use. Since everything's migrated to 4 and 5G, so now we're using 3Gs to move that data. So this data comes in the next day. So I can log into these meters, and I can pull up each individual person's info to see how much water they use. If they have a leak, these things will send me an email saying that they've seen continuous flow of 3 gallons. Actually, they'll tell me the exact gallons, but they're triggered. If it exceeds 3 gallons of continuous flow for 24 hours, it'll shoot me an email or the customer and let them know that you have a potential leak. And then we go out there, we call the customer, and sometimes they'll be like, yes, I have a running toilet, I'll fix it. Sometimes they're not sure. It might be something in their service line, and we'll go try to figure out if it's in their service line, or maybe they have a hose bib that's running that's leaking. So that helps us, one, conserve water, because obviously we're in the desert Southwest, and with climate change, it's only getting drier out there. So we want to conserve as much water as possible, and also it helps reduce water bills to our customers. I can also pull the whole data of my whole system. So we have 3 systems, A, B, and C, and I can then pull my whole data of water consumption on my system by the day, week, month, year. And that helps me identify if there's leaks going on in my system, like unaccounted water, right? Water loss, because that's water that's not making it to the meters, but I can see what's going on, and we can try to figure out if we have a leak on our system. So that's very helpful on an operational standpoint of finding potential large leaks, somewhere along your system. We're not just getting funded through SDS, water, and wastewater projects, but we were fortunate enough to get funded a new transfer station that we're hoping to build by the end of this year. We do have an older transfer station that's outdated, that was built in the 90s. This one's going to be completely enclosed Butler building. It's going to be a much larger one. People are going to be able to drive through it and dump their trash in it. Our older system, we put this in SDS a while ago. I don't know. I put it in with Julie probably like 6 or 7 years ago. And she laughed and we laughed because we're like, this is never going to get funded. It's going to rank low. It's never going to get funded. But I said, just put it in, because you never know what the future holds. And lo and behold, IHS, EPA, as you've heard, all these agencies are flush with lots of money now because of the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Act, and this got funded. So, what this proves is, put it on there. It's kind of like the old saying, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Well, on SDS, I put everything in there. I put everything I want and the kitchen sink, because if it's not on SDS, it cannot be funded. But if it's on SDS, it may get funded. And we've had projects too that, this one ranked low, and then all of a sudden they had money for this one. Our smart meter project was ranked kind of low, but that year SDS had a bunch of money, and we used the funding to get that project up off the ground. So I would say put it in there. Even if you talk to your IHS, local engineer, they might say, well, I don't know if this is going to score very well, but it doesn't matter. It's your system, and you put those on there, right? Don't let IHS, I love IHS, they work great, but don't let them dictate what you put on SDS, right? These are for your tribe and your deficiencies, and your tribe and your potential deficiency better than IHS does. So do not be afraid to tell them this needs to be on there. The nice thing about SDS2, which we've done and played with over the years with scoring, is there's a tribal contribution score on there. And so some years there might be projects that you're like, well, the tribe's not going to have any money to contribute to, like, say, a transfer station. So we're going to put our tribal contribution at 0. So we get 0 points on this. But maybe those other projects ahead of it get funded and they start dropping off SDS, and maybe the tribe has extra money that year, or because those other ones are funded, those aren't a priority. And the tribe can say, you know what, we do have money now that we can put towards a transfer station or whatever the project may be. And that increases your total points, right? So this is a good example. We actually had a lot of projects funded through SDS, right? We got the tanks funded, we got wells, we had all this stuff funded. And I was like, you know what? We really need this transfer station now. So the tribe's going to max out our contribution on this project. And that raised our score from, like, I think we were down in like the high 50s. And that got us up into like 72, 74 points, which is kind of like the sweet spot to get funded, Like they say, C's get degrees. So shoot for that 70% if you can. Obviously, B's and A's are always better because you're more likely to get funded. But we put it in there. I think this total on this project, IHS is contributing around $600,000, maybe 500. Maybe 300. It might be 300, and the tribe's putting in like 100,000 of its own cash, right? So about a quarter of the project is coming from us, but it's going to get a brand new, beautiful transfer station for us. So this is another project that we put in. So we talked about solid waste. Now we talked about potable water. Let's talk a little bit about wastewater. So San Pasqual is one of the fastest growing reservations, I believe, in terms of new residents coming on in Southern California. IHS approached us and said, hey, we are getting all these applications for septic and sewer. Why don't we try to build a wastewater treatment plant instead of just scattered sites for septic? I said, that's a wonderful idea because I hate septic systems. Not that I hate them. It's just that everyone calls me when they have septic issues. So I have 400 individual wastewater treatment plants called septic systems, right? Then that means that's 400 people calling me about a potential problem. I said, let's just consolidate this down into one wastewater treatment plant. I just said, yes, we get so many applications. Let's do this. So we put this in SDS, I don't know, what, probably a long time ago, 8 years ago. And they said, this is never going to get funded. You know why? Because the price tag on this is $15 million. We don't get $15 million probably in 1 year from Congress. And I said, keep it in there. Let it ride. Like I'm at the craps table, let it ride. So we let this thing ride for 8 years, thinking, oh, it's never going to get funded. But then what happens? A new administration comes in, all this money starts coming in. IHS is like, we got $18 million. I said, let's do it. Unfortunately, prices have gone up, since we started this project. So I need actually $28 million, but that's okay. I need 10 more. That's nothing because I got USDA here. That's going to give me the other 10, right? So also we got $18 million, but IHS and we said, let's phase this project because it's a big project. So we're going to actually phase this. This is all the lift stations. We're going to need about 3 lift stations. We're trying to use gravity as much as possible, right? Gravity is your friend. So we're using it as much as possible, and we're connecting in districts A, B, and C with the idea that we will phase it out over time. And so this is what the phased approach looks like. In the beginning, we will build our wastewater treatment plant right kind of in the middle of this land that the tribe just brought into trust. Phase 1 will be this part of District A, the north part. Then phase 2 will be the southern part of District A. Phase 3 will be District B, the north part of District B. Phase 4 will be the kind of east to west portion of District B. And the last phase will be District C along Woods Valley. So what does that allow us to do? It allows us to get the project going because we have $18 million. So the idea is we build the wastewater treatment plant, hopefully knock out District A and maybe parts of District B and get them into the wastewater treatment plant. And then we go out and we find the rest of the money because this is like a 5-year project. Now we've started this project. We've done the pre-construction engineering. We're starting the we're still working on the engineering, but we hired Kimberly Horn, which did all this kind of work for us. And now we're doing the environmental phase of it and biological phase. We just started that with Kimberly Horn this month, with the idea that hopefully next year, maybe around this time, we'll be able to put out phase 1 for RFP for construction and build the wastewater treatment plant. And while we're doing this work, I'm calling EPA, I'm calling USDA, I'm calling Bureau of Reclamation to say, hey, do you want to pitch in on this project? Because success breeds success. And if you build it, they will come. So an agency wants to highlight, look, we did really well with our money and we already have this project started. So they're just going to write our coattails that we've done all this other work with IHS. And they're going to pitch in some money so they can put on their reports. Look, we got this wastewater treatment plant funded for San Pasqual, and we worked with all these agencies. You go to an agency saying I need $18 to $28 million, they're just going to laugh in your face probably. But if you go to an agency and say, hey, I already have $18 million, I just need another 10, they might come back and say, well, I can't give you 10, but I can give you 4. And then you go to another agency, or maybe EPA gets more funding and they're like, hey, we want to finish this project with you guys. We got the extra money you need. So don't let the price tag dictate the project. You can still do the project. Just look at maybe doing it as a phased approach. Even those smart meters, we wanted to do the whole reservation. In the first phase was just District B. And then the following year, I went out to the state of California and said, look, guys, I did all these smart meters for District B. I have all these reports, and documentation. Can you give me some money to do District A? And they said, yeah, we'll give me $500,000. And I did District A and C and knocked them all out at that time. So, just an example of don't let the project scare you. There's always a way to get it done. Work with IHS to help, because those preliminary engineering reports go a long way, not just with them or EPA, but you can also use it for BOR. You can use it for your local state or county if there's money out there. So yes, please do that. Don't let IHS dictate what you put on SDS. Put everything on SDS that you can imagine and then some. And that's my presentation. So if you have any questions or comments for me and Julie.
On the wastewater system, in an environment where you have limited space for growth, I would imagine the wastewater system allows for denser development. And is the tribe considering that with this investment?
Yeah, so that is so a little bit about San Pasqual, the way the tribe functions and works. Each tribal member gets up to 5 acres of land, which is great 50 years ago. And then in those 50 years, they've had kids, they got grandkids, some have great grandkids. Our topography is just like this, very rolling hills. So where the septic system sits and their leach lines are, or the reserve fields are, that now gets opened up for another home for that family. So what we're seeing right now with this project, what it's going to allow is a lot of infill growth on our assignments that we have. So now your grandson or granddaughter who wants to start a home and a family can build where we would have, the leach lines. Or even then, if those leach lines, basically to make a septic system work, and Julian, correct me if I'm wrong, you need about at least a third of an acre, right? For proper, septic systems, right? But you could go smaller if you don't have to have septic systems. So the idea is this will open up growth. This will also open up areas where maybe they're next to a creek, and we have to have an offset from a creek to make sure that wastewater doesn't flow into the creek. So now you can build a house. Or we also have a ton of granite on our reservation, so we may not have too much granite or too much clay, and we're not getting percolation where we want to build. Now that all goes away. I will also say on septic systems and water systems with IHS, we entered into a force account. So my tribal labor puts in all septics and water. All those smart meters you saw, my water guys, we put all those in. We didn't hire somebody. That was $120,000 that went right into my people's pocket, right? We pulled out all the old meters. We put in new meter boxes. We strapped on the smart meters. We did that for the entire reservation.
What did you do with the septic tanks that were abandoned? Did you pump them?
So we haven't abandoned any yet because we haven't started. But yes, the idea is, and I should take that back. We have abandoned some septic systems that have failed through the force account. So all we do is we go in, we pump the tank, we break the top concrete lid, and we fill it in, we backfill it with dirt, and then we just bury it in place. So the tank will be completely empty and buried in place, and the leach lines will just be abandoned in place when the time comes. And the residents will just, if they decide to build there, they'll just plow through the leach lines and throw them away, basically.
Did that add to your budget significantly?
That is, so in our budget right now for the wastewater treatment plant is to abandon out all these septic systems. So to pump a septic system right now at San Pasqual is about $500. So 500 times 400 homes, that's what, $20,000, $200,000. What's my math on that? Yeah. What do you think? And what do you think the highest cost on this project is? Anyone want to take a guess? Associated with that, it's going to be repaving the roads, right? Pavement, because we're going to be tearing up a lot of roadways, and we're going to have to repave shoulder to shoulder. So we're looking in some areas to maybe go off the roads or on the shoulder of the roads where possible, and maybe doing like a walking path, right? And doing like a hard DG walking scape. Any other questions out there?
We have one more minute, but
yeah, thanks, John. That was great. Just to echo a couple things you talked about. On the other side of things, if a project gets EPA funding first, then IHS may be more willing to step in with their funds as well to help out. But to go back to the O&M scoring, that there's kind of a way to double dip here, because EPA is going to be coming in doing a sanitary survey of a water system and asking the exact same questions. Do you have an O&M plan, emergency response plan, certified operator, all these things? You will get extra points on your O&M score and get a higher ranked project by also addressing all the things that EPA is looking for too. So it's a double whammy.
Yeah. So honestly, just, if you take away anything, reach out to your IHS, office, wherever you're located. Start having that conversation of what you need funded and get into SDS. Now's a good time. There's lots of money out there. It's almost too much money where even IHS is overwhelmed because they're out there doing all the engineering and technical parts, but that's once it's been funded, right? I just need to get my money earmarked for me. We can deal with delays on getting the project going, and we've experienced that, as Jason knows, with Greg Golson too, at Duro Road with our pump houses has been kind of an ongoing thing right now, but we're almost gonna get that wrapped up. So, but just, you got to get your foot in the door, right, to get the money. Thank you.